Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Garris.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
How would you describe your leadership style and philosophy?
Most of my leadership philosophy is built on personal experience. Progress comes through discomfort.
Where are you on just the general AI hype curve?
I experience it to be changing pace, in many cases, changing quality.
If you could go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I would say,
All right, welcome into RLC Tech Perspectives. I'm Tyler Canning, joined as always by Corey Wisdom. We are in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona today for a guest that we have been very excited to get the chance to sit down and talk to for a long time. A man who has over 2 decades of experience building and transforming technology in some of the most demanding environments, from starting his own security consulting firm to moving into corporate IT leadership at DHL, then going on to spend 11 years at Honeywell, climbing his way to vice president and CIO, then moving on to spend time serving as CIO for BAE Systems and the current Chief Information and Digital Officer at Northrop Grumman. Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Garris. Welcome to the show.
thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
I have to say, of all places to travel to get to do a podcast, I love Phoenix, Arizona. Pretty great, right? It's awesome. It's awesome. Corey's going to take me up Camelback. I will have to say I went out for a jog this morning, watching the sun rise over the mountains, and I was just like, we don't have this at home.
It's unseasonably warm. I would not recommend it in July for sure. And it's starting to feel that way these days. But
Yeah.
yes, we are here.
This is a good time of year because I think it gets too hot from there's only 2 hours of the day I've noticed where I get too hot, but the mornings here, beautiful. Yeah. I've always said if I had to pick a place to move outside of Chicago, it would be Scottsdale. Right? I love it every time I come visit. Yeah. Again, thank you for being here. We have a ton that we want to talk to you about. We want to talk to, obviously, your current role at Northrop Grumman, your leadership style and philosophy. And, it wouldn't be a technology podcast if we didn't spend time talking about AI.
Of course. Yeah.
But I think a great place to start would be your background and origin story. You went to college for an English literature degree. I've heard that you also had a modeling career as well. And when we were talking yesterday, you said, I actually got my start at a nightclub. Can you just take us through your career journey?
Sure.
And up until the point, I guess, of getting into IT?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was young, when we moved around all the time, and it wasn't a military family or anything like that. I was just chasing jobs, and we grew up pretty humble, to be sure. And the good piece of that, I think, is you get comfortable with change. You get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, but it also puts a little fire in your belly, right, in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. I didn't really know how to direct that, and we got through high school, worked a little bit, went into school. At that time in my life, I had very little clear direction, and I didn't know a lot of that. I never had a checking account. I didn't realize that you're supposed to actually maintain full-time status at a school if you want to maintain a grant for financial aid. So that was a new one on me. So I bounced in and out of school while I was just trying to, kind of make ends meet. And I woke up one day, I was probably 20 years old, and I was maybe 19. I'm like, I gotta do more in my life. And so I enrolled in a community college, and I thought, what would I actually finish? Because, I didn't have a ton of focus area when we're growing up outside of, you work and you eat and you go to school. And so I thought about, I like to read. So I would start to focus on that. And in the background, I would buy paperback books of the Western canon and just sort of consume as much as I possibly could to try and get ready for this, because I thought I'm way behind, right? And I think that was thematic for me through most of my career, was this feeling of being behind. And again, that created a sense of urgency for me. So anyway, I did well in an honors program at community college, and they had the ability to matriculate up to Boston University, and Boston University had a crew team, and I thought crew looked cool, so why not go to Boston? And so again, not the best decision making, but it been a great experience. And I joined the crew team, and I was working, and I was putting myself through school bartending, and and a little bit of time passes, and I get close to the end of my degree, and Boston University, at least at the time, I don't know what it is like now, only accepts 7 years of credits. Well, given the start of how I was bouncing in and out of schools, I started rolling off of credits as fast as I could put them on. And I just ran out of money. So I'm like, I got to stop this. It's like, I can't do this anymore. So I put a hold on that, and I took a job managing a nightclub where I had been bartending. And I think I was making like $27,000 a year. Thinking like this, I can actually tailor my suits now or something. Because it was a very different kind of, but effective. Anyway, so I did that for a little bit, and I met a person at the bar. I was just, I don't know, replacing like register tape or something. I don't know what it was. And this guy walks up and he orders a drink, and we start talking. And he's, members only jacket and the Velcro Reeboks, and he's sort of your classic sort of, 1990s tech guy, right? And he tells me he's in IT, and we start talking. I'm like, IT, what's that? So he explains it to me, and I said, well, how did you get started in that? Because you make 3 times the money I make, and I like that idea, and so let me kind of work into that. And he says, no, you don't want to do this. To get into this kind of career, you have to read these really big books, and you have to take these tests because of the MCSE, the Microsoft Certified System Engineer, was the base certification at the time. And I'm like, I'm pretty good at reading big books and taking tests. Like, let me go see this. So I saved up a little bit of money, and I built my own computer, and I bought the first book, which was like desktop computing, and I learned it on my own PC, and I took a test and I passed. And then I moved from being a nightclub manager to being a desktop tech. Wow. And then I loaded server on it, and I bought the server book, and then I learned server, and then I took the test and I passed it, and then I got promoted to the server team. And then, and you just sort of snowball it, right? Yeah, exactly. And I think that the thing for me, if I look back on growing up, it was, again, you're hungry, you want to grow, you're a little uncomfortable with discomfort, but you're pursuing something, and that urgency just carried. I felt it strongly until I got my first VP job. But I incremented through technology for a period of time, and then got into messaging. And then I started writing articles that got published in magazines around how to do certain things. And I at the time, after messaging, it was sort of .com bubble days, and I was doing some deep sort of network, packet inspection kind of stuff. It was way more manual back then. And 9/11 happened. And during post 9/11, the government said we have to secure critical infrastructure. Somebody at the power company in Arizona had read my article on some piece of messaging security, and they reached out to me and asked if I would come and help them do some security work. And that led to about 2 years of consulting. That's why I live in beautiful Arizona now. And there again, you have these moments of clarity, I think. And one of them for me was, it's like the BlackBerry problem. You can only sell so many minutes in a day, but you can sell lots of data. I'd look at leadership the same way. I don't scale beyond the hours that I'm chasing as a consultant. I probably should get into leadership. So how do I get into leadership? Because I've never done it. It sounded like I was a desktop supervisor, became a manager and a senior manager, whatever. And so I thought project management. So I convinced somebody I could do a project, and we did that around. That's when I moved to DHL. Mm-hmm. And it was probably 6 months into that project, the manager for the group that we were doing this big project for left, and they offered me the job of managing. And within another year and a half, I was managing 2 teams. And then I got into this idea of, do the principles of leadership apply across different disciplines, or are they unique to, this only works for this particular group? Yeah. And so I got to explore some of that as I grew out in opportunity. From there, I went to Honeywell and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to share as much detail as is useful. But it was definitely an early career of incremental learning, and constant pursuit of what is missing in my capability, my career, my resume, my ability to deliver technically, and go fill in those gaps.
I think the healthy sense of urgency is great, because it's always, you learn more when you're kind of stretching or a little bit outside of where your skill set is. But I never knew that you made that leap from a conversation at a bar with somebody that was coming there. They got you into IT. That's incredible.
Yeah, I still owe the guy a thank you.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
The big question I had around the English lit background, I mean, you said, hey, I know how to read big books. Was there anything out of that was more of a feature than a bug in terms of you getting into IT? Like, do you find yourself leaning on some aspect of that you've just kind of used throughout your entire career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a really heavy piece of studying humanities in general, I think, is evaluation. It's analysis. It's why did this artist or this author or this architect make these decisions at that time, and what came before and what came after, and so on and so forth. And I think that idea of scrutiny and analysis certainly plays into problem solving. It plays into logic. It also plays into the concepts of continuous evolution, because you see this, you go all the way back, take literature as an example. You go back, I mentioned the Western canon. It starts with, traditionally kind of Homer and what happened there, or Aristotle, and how do those things show up in books that are being published today? Yeah. And I think understanding the evolution of a thing is really important to as completely as possible to understand that thing itself. And I think those things those concepts lead to an appreciation for what it takes to really understand, and that understanding leads to better business decisions. It leads to better leadership, and so on and so forth. So I do think there's a correlation in that. I also think communication. It doesn't matter what you do, if you can communicate effectively, that's important. So certainly that's the obvious side of it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I think everyone kind of goes through that phase when you turn 18, 19, 20, even getting into your mid 20s, of just kind of like, need to find my kind of lane here. But like Corey said, it's pretty crazy that it was just a guy at a bar and you were just boom, off and running from there.
This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get into your current role.
I think it's just cool that you are at Northrop Grumman. Like, how cool is that out of everywhere, your entire career, you've ended up here? It's a pretty cool role and organization.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And I often find myself reflecting with gratitude and maybe a little shock that I'm in this position today. And it's not that me or my team are doing great things. We're certainly trying to and trying to step up to the legacy of the organization that you're talking about, whether it be space exploration or there's things in miniaturization of processing capabilities, or stealth aircraft, or what. There's so much neat stuff that's happening. It's a fascinating organization. It's also interesting to me because I came to Northrop Grumman from Honeywell, and Honeywell was, I have been there in a little bit, but when I was there, certainly a manufacturing company. Yeah. So the question is, how do we take this design and build it or develop and deliver it as efficiently as possible? Northrop Grumman is an engineering company. And so the question is, how do we engineer this thing for the highest amount of capability? Yeah. And when there's a problem or a challenge in how we manufacture it, we look at it from an engineering lens and go, are there more elegant solutions to the engineering that will make this easier to manufacture? And that's a very different use case and hypothesis. And I think it's a different challenge to solve in terms of how, as an IT organization or a technology organization, do you remain credible in the eyes of the people producing technology that literally kind of shapes the world and that we know today. And so it's an exciting place to be. It's a humbling place to be. And the legacy matters. But there's a lot of pride in the company too, which I think is well earned. Yeah.
When you talked about knowing about the evolution of a company, and that kind of helps you with better decision making, I feel like that's ingrained, that creativity and the research and scientists. You guys are doing some bleeding edge stuff. From an IT perspective, though, how do you balance the mundane? Like, to me, I feel like that would be a challenge, is you're supporting these folks that are doing incredibly innovative stuff, but when you need to, do something about improving employee onboarding or something relatively mundane like that, how do you rally the troops on that, or how do you get them excited about those types of changes?
Yeah, I would never underestimate our ability to overcomplicate a thing, including mundane things. There's that piece of it. But jokes aside, I think it's really important to look at what you deliver. And this, we talked about earlier, the idea of business concepts translating beyond a current role or current set of customers or whatever it is. And this, I think, is a fundamental business concept. It doesn't matter whether you manage 5 people or 5,000 people. This still is relevant. You need to understand and be deliberate about how you approach your organization and meeting the needs of the company or the customers that you're working for. And in the deliberateness of that, you start with, what are my core deliverables for my organization? Do I have the right leadership team? Am I organized in a way that makes sense? What's my vision for that team, right? So who do we seek to be? What's my mission? Who do we choose to be today? And then understanding the strategy of the company and then translating that into very deliberately the strategy of the organization. And then you get into culture and other things that allow you to continue to mature. But there's lots of different ways to do this. But for me, there's a series of very deliberate steps. So then you go back to this idea of mundane things. One of the parts of your strategy, your identity, your culture, has to be acknowledging that as a function, IT delivers not only on net new things, but also the responsible, secure, compliant delivery of current things. That has to be a part of the identity that you establish, and doing that in really good ways or great ways. There are ways to measure that still can give you pride in the delivery of that. It's easy for an organization or for a company to just say, oh, we sell products, therefore IT's value is in the deployment of new product or new capability or new solutions. And we have to remind ourselves and our internal customers regularly, we have a responsibility here as well. And so I think shaping your strategy that way, shaping your mission that way is very important, and that lets your team get behind it. I think instilling a sense of ownership is a thing we could talk all day about. I think that incremental improvement is critical, and you can own onboarding. You can own PC delivery. You can own mobile. You can own commodity spaces and really get very, very good at them. Yeah. One of the things I'm most proud about in my career is something that we did at Honeywell together, which was around automating PCs and PC delivery, where there was no approval necessary. The entire process was automated. That rolled into the leases, that rolled into the ordering, that built on standards, that built on personas. Like, that's not easy to do, but you can be really proud of it, even though it's a commodity space. So I think that's a big piece of how we approach that, and we get excited about the net new stuff. Right? There's tons of energy around that, but understanding good and great in your own space can get you excited no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's really, you're enabling the scientists, the innovators, all of that stuff. IT can really be the grease that kind of enables all of that smooth action when you have all those fundamentals in place. It's
so true. And if we, from a vision perspective, we talk about being a catalyst for business, right? And so, does our customer have confidence in how we deliver? Do we have capabilities that we can bring that actually transcend internal support to our external customers, and so on and so forth? So that's where we want to be. But our mission is to be an accelerant. Right. And I remember the days in IT where you would say, IT is a necessary evil, or it's a cost center, or,
I think some of that still exists today.
All the time. Right. But we, especially in these days, in the technology that's available today, we can be an accelerant. We can help engineers be more effective. We can help HR be more effective. We can help legal be more effective, and be thought leaders in how they leverage technology to advance their own missions. And that's to your point, that's a really exciting area to lean in.
Yeah, be that force multiplier.
Is there anything that you think that you would need to take into account in your role at Northrop Grumman specifically, similar to Corey's question, simply because you're working with some of the smartest people on the planet versus, I guess we'll just say, the average company?
Yeah, like how do you get credibility?
Yeah. I love the concept of credibility. I think credibility is born in consistent performance. And consistent transparency. And if you do that over time, people will believe what you say because you have earned that belief. And I think credibility is the currency of business. If you're not credible, you cannot be influential. If you can't be influential, you can't lead at scale.
That's great.
I think those are we can rely on those, at least in my experience. The intelligence or the experience, sometimes you get, these bunch of engineers who say they could easily do your job better than you could do it or whatever. And maybe they could, right?
Yeah,
thankfully they choose to make products for us. But I think when it comes to them, they still appreciate we deliver as we promise. We meet our schedule commitments. We meet our financial commitments. I also think, though, there's an element of this, and there's themes, right? You'll find themes in the way I look at leadership, but one of these themes of understanding a thing as completely as possible. It's easy to walk into a new role, and I'm sure your listeners have dealt with this. I'm sure we've all dealt with this, but it's easy to walk in a new role and go, wow, what kind of crazy people were making these decisions before I showed up, right? But generally speaking, smart people make smart decisions with smart data. And so the question for us as new leaders in a new role is to just take a pause and go, come in with candor about what you see, but curiosity about the reasons behind it. And I think in doing that, you have an opportunity to have greater empathy for what came before. And I think empathy and performance together help build a relationship between you and your customers.
Yep.
And if all I do is have empathy and just sort of react to the customers, well, that can be that, we're going to do the things that are important to each individual, and that can be myopic a bit in your view. But when you understand them and then you help them understand your own performance or your own decisions, that helps people come together. And I think that really leads to the better relationship with functions and engineers and operations and all of them.
Well, and if you're not aware of what's influenced or kind of got them to where they ended up, oftentimes, even if you address the symptom, the problem's going to come back because you haven't changed those underlying factors. So
sure.
That's great advice. And then you talked about transparency. We understand from some of the LinkedIn posts you've put out there, you do ask me anything. And I think that's been something you've done at multiple organizations, correct?
Yeah, I have.
What's the big driver behind that, and have you seen success?
Yeah, so the way we look at leadership in general with our employees is it is important for our employees to understand they can challenge leadership. If you don't create that environment, then you're not getting truth. People are going to tell you what they think you want to hear. Sometimes there's fear for honesty. There's, hey, I don't want to post a yellow or a red because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. We need to create an environment where it's okay to challenge. You also want to create an environment where once decisions are made, you're going to move forward, to be sure. But that is a very important thing. And Ask Me Anything is these forums where anybody in the company can get on these calls and ask any question they want of leadership in front of everybody else. The original focus on this was about getting common answers out because people were saying, oh, I heard you want this, or I heard you don't like that. And I was having to run around and sort of defend or recalibrate that with a bunch of different folks. And I said, you know what, forget this. Let's answer these questions in public ways. Which actually led to another piece on this. I usually lead those sessions by saying, what is a contentious, challenging concern for the organization? Are we going to have layoffs?
Yeah.
Why do executives make so much money? What's happening with the stock price, and why do you still want to drive ops up or margin up?
Yeah.
And so we start with a kind of contentious topic to just rip the Band-Aid off of that. Mm-hmm. And then we open it up for questions. And I tell my team, success is people are trying to take my legs out in front of everybody else. It's not that I want disrespect. It's just I want people's truth.
Yeah.
And I think it's led to that. And you can see, and I've seen this in multiple companies. I did this at Honeywell. I did it at BAE and now at Northrop Grumman. It starts out with everybody doing anonymous questions, and then people start to post their names, and you can respond, well, hey, Christian, this is what the way we're looking at that thing, or hey, Robert, or hey, Sally, or whatever it is, and let people see you not overreact to the challenge. And I think that's a really hugely valuable thing for people.
How long have you been doing them for?
At least 10 years, probably a little bit longer than that. But
I imagine, I guess, going back to the first time you did it at Northrop Grumman specifically, is the first time where people a little reserved, and now they're kind of like, all right, we know we're free to kind of ask. like you
Yeah,
said,
they're
the
submitting
contentious
anonymous questions,
Yeah.
et cetera. Yeah, and softball questions, and I love the comms team at Northrop Grumman, and it's great support. But they were asking, "Do you want us to pre-stage some questions?" Which is a very common practice in these sort of open, town halls and these types of things. And I said, "Nope, let anything they want." I've even had situations where we knew there was a challenging topic, and if nobody was going to ask a question about it, I've asked my team to do an anonymous question that was borderline aggressive.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just about modeling that willing to have the dialogue, and sometimes you get some great ideas, and you can come out of that and make some tweaks, and then you go back and you can thank that person in public the next time, and you really just start to generate momentum for truth.
Yeah.
I think it makes a much better culture where people feel like we can have that open debate and input from everyone. And then once we all say, yep, this is the way we're going, everyone feels heard and kind of is more likely to support the goal. Yesterday when we met, you talked about this idea of looking at everyone's lens, that as a leader, your aperture increases and each person kind of has their own view. But the goal of a leader is to kind of put that together, not take anyone's individual perspective, but take it as a whole. Can you kind of go over that again and just reiterate where folks in leadership roles should be soliciting feedback, but ultimately they're the ones having to make that accountable decision?
Yeah, the idea is that if I look at something only through the lens of my own job, I only see the pros and cons relative to my experience, my tools, my customers. My boss is going to look at it from a broader aperture because they're looking at it through the lens of multiple organizations. For me, this started actually in portfolio management. So this idea of how do you evaluate potential ROI, return on investment, or value for an idea or a proposed investment that's being made. And what I found is if you shrink something down small enough, it will not hold value. And there's some things that will never have a financial ROI, but they might have a security ROI, they might have a compliance ROI, they might have a cultural benefit, whatever that might be. And if I only look at things in the context of a hard dollar ROI at a small enough lens, it won't hold.
Yep.
So one of the things you can do is you can broaden that, and you group things together to do the things you need to do with the things that actually will carry them financially. But it just got me thinking about how a particular piece of a project or a particular request only looks in the context of that request. And as leaders, you have to continue to broaden that aperture. You need to understand. And so there's reasons why companies will often make decisions that may not make sense to individuals in the company or teams in the company or even functions in the company, but writ large, they do make sense to the shareholders and to the board.
Yep.
And I think seeking to understand that, go back to the comments about curiosity, right? Go be curious, try and understand the why of it. Ask the questions. I invite people to ask me the questions, and then we try and show them the why from that broader aperture.
Yeah. Well, that was a great way to look at it because it's kind of building the entire picture and not just taking any one sliver. You'd be remiss to just try to look at it, like you said, myopically that way. So
I think one of the pieces, if I can add to that, is as technology leaders, oftentimes we will think that our only contribution can be in tech. Hey, let me tell you about ERP. Hey, let me tell you about what we're doing with automation, whatever it might be. But we have opportunities to show up as business leaders. And when you think about being a business leader, it's understanding the needs of the business, the shareholders, the board, the customers, of course, and the employees. And by broadening our own aperture to consider all of that, I think we show up as more credible leaders, even in technology. It helps us make better decisions. And so aspirationally, my goal is always to show up as a business leader who happens to run tech, ideally know something about it a little bit, right? Yeah. We all want to be functional experts, but to use that aperture as the measurement of how I'm showing up as a leader. And I think that's something that tends to work.
Yeah. And this is not meant to make you repeat yourself in any way, but I did want to ask explicitly, from what I've noticed, you seem to have a genuine passion for thinking about leadership itself. I would say almost in a philosophical way. How would you describe your leadership style and philosophy, and why is it so critical to you in your current role?
Yeah, I actually love the question. And I do think about leadership all the time, partly because I think it transcends what you're doing. I've run procurement, I've run IT, I've done desktop, I've done project management. But the same principles apply. But partly because I think it's the thing that you can contribute when you're talking to any leader in any space is, what do you think about how you approach the act of motivating and directing and hearing and enabling a team. I think that it's just sort of it's a more universal language to speak. So I do spend a fair amount of time thinking about that. Most of my leadership philosophy is built on, like most of us, I would guess, on personal experience. I think progress comes through discomfort. If I stay in the comfortable, I will not progress. If I don't want to go read hard books, I'm not going to progress.
I was going to say, that sounds like a consistent theme throughout your journey. Yeah,
it is. And it's what I challenge my team to do. It doesn't matter what you do. If you turn a nut on a manufacturing floor, if you manage ERP, if you run an entire infrastructure and operations team, do you understand what good looks like? Do you understand what great looks like? And how are you making tomorrow a little bit better than today? You don't do that when you say, I'm comfortable, I'm good, right? So I believe that progress comes through discomfort. That's a fundamental thing. I believe that continuous improvement is the most scalable approach. And if you look up, if you're making things 1% better each day, you're going to look up in 2 years and you're not even going to recognize where you came from. And by the way, your team's going to have come along that. There's lots of experiences that come through that. And I think that relationships and connections come through those thousands of little interactions, not these grand gestures. And I think that's another important concept, is that you're in there with your team, you're helping them, you're supporting them, you're enabling them, but you're also holding them accountable. And one of the cornerstones of the cultural philosophy that we have at Northrop Grumman is this idea of measurement, because we have to welcome accountability. We have to pursue it. We have to sort of be bold in our own accountability and go after that, because it leads to the credibility we were talking about. It helps us continually drive to those improvements because we now have a yardstick that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. It helps us articulate that performance in ways that our customers and our employees will understand. So measurement and accountability is another key area from a leadership standpoint. I loathe micromanagement, but micromanagement is, in my experience, if it's not on the leader, most of the times I think it is, but if it's not on the leader, it's on the inability to delegate complexity. Right? There's this idea of delegating complexity or delegating tasks. Mm-hmm. And in my past, I've made the mistake of doing this, where I would go and I would come up with the solution and I would delegate the task to the team to try and get to that solution. And it just doesn't scale. But more importantly, your leaders don't learn how to lead by just executing the tasks that you give them. And so for a core leadership philosophy for me is, you got to have a team that can understand and accept the problem and then be capable to go solve that problem. And it doesn't mean you don't collaborate with them. It doesn't mean you don't, help them or redirect them. But that idea of successful leadership can delegate complexity, not just tasks. And then the last thing I would say on this from a philosophy perspective is that I don't think yesterday's systems, I'm talking process, maybe organizational model, maybe the tools that you use, are designed to move at today's speed. And so you have to constantly be looking at the systems that underlie the technology capability you're trying to bring to bear, the way you do a project, the way your customers, execute their own processes. We can't just slam AI or automation onto a thing and expect it to move at pace, right? You have to constantly relook at the system, and so you try and build systems that can manage and enable in today's sort of really hyper speed focused environment, and you try and build leaders that can handle the complexity of either developing them or deploying them or sustaining them. And those, so long answer to your question, but that's kind of how I look at leadership generally.
It's great. Are you aware that I think you are, in talking with you the last couple of days, you are phenomenal at coming up with one-liners for your points.
Succinctly.
Yeah.
It's good for a podcast.
It's a good business. I'm going to use that one. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's see where we want to go here. I want to talk about innovation. I think, for me, I find the aerospace and defense industry in and of itself just so fascinating. And obviously Northrop Grumman is, quite frankly, just such a cool company. But I would imagine that innovation is probably a pretty high priority there, right? How do you enact change and drive innovation at just such a large and complex environment?
Mm-hmm. So interestingly enough, when you have highly regulated industries, and I haven't worked in healthcare or banking, but I have to assume it's similar anywhere you've got compliance measures or where risk is at a premium, right? Where you're trying to manage risk at a premium. It actually can be very, very hard to innovate. And there's a difference between I'm going to innovate the science or the technology for a product that we're going to give to our customers based on their requirements, and I'm going to innovate in the way that we deliver. So for example, I can't innovate inside of Northrop Grumman and just say, hey, we're just going to pick up a bunch of commercial AI tools and put them into our environment. I can't do that. By the way, I don't even remotely believe that that's the most financially viable way to approach this, and we may get into that later.
Yep.
But we don't have the choice to do that, and so we have to be almost creative in how we innovate, or innovative in how we innovate, and so the way we look at it is, first and foremost, what is the boundary of the thing that I'm working on, right? It could be my team, could be my function, could be my process, could be my project, could be this customer, it could be this contract. I mean, we all have, things that go beyond a specific task that we're trying to achieve. So if we understand the boundary of that, now what does good or great look like in that? And I mentioned that earlier, and having an awareness. How do we get that? That could be through a partner, a Gartner, a Forrester, a EY, or whatever. It could be through having strong relationships across the defense industrial base for our industry, and understanding what other folks are doing. It could be taking what's happening in a particular space, like take AI as an example. We'll look at Claude, we'll look at Gemini 3, we'll look at GPT, and go, what are new capabilities and functions being brought to bear? How could I do that within the constraints of my environment, or my compliance posture, my security posture, whatever that might be? And so we tend to start with what's my environment, try and understand what good looks like, be masters of the obligations we have to secure or comply, and then we figure out how to sort of navigate through that environment. But the expectation is that we are incrementally pursuing better all the time, and that requires innovation. I think that sometimes people can increment for so long, but you get to a point where increment doesn't, like, you have to think differently, and that sort of forces it. There's other levers you can use, right? You can take costs out, you can put costs in. I mean, there's different levers you can use as a leader, but generally speaking, culturally, it's that expectation of continuous improvement and an expectation of mastery of the environment and the limitations that you have to work through.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to AI, you talk about working within the confines. You went down the path of building your own and using NVIDIA's AI factory model and kind of owning your own destiny. Is that something that you feel other leaders or other organizations should be exploring, and kind of what contributed to that?
Yeah. And for the record, we do both, right? So we have some cloud services we consume where the buy is materially better in terms of capability relative to the build, and that's fine. So we don't, but our primary focus is on build, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And I think different industries are going to have different combinations of demands that may produce a different answer. But I would start by saying building up your own environment affords you an opportunity to make in the grand scheme of things, a pretty small investment. You need the infrastructure and the switching and the storage and all the things that sort of go into that. It's not just buying a few GPUs and putting them in your data center, but what open source models make sense, what's your data fabric, but we had a data fabric we were using, right? So we happen to be a Databricks shop. Snowflake is great, and you can use that as well. But once you have this ecosystem built mostly of things you have anyway, because you've organized it in a way, it affords you an opportunity to make incremental value without having significant additional cost.
Yeah.
I don't have to spend anything but labor to take a new LLM use case and apply it through an MLOps pipeline and push out new capability for one of my functions or one of my sectors. So because we did the upfront investment, and again, it was not material. I could spend 20 times what we spent on that AI farm with a major AI provider externally in a year.
Yeah.
So because we did that, we now have crisper opportunity for use case. And the nice thing about that is I'm not stressed about ROI because almost everything has ROI. Yep. And you hear a lot of folks in industry talking about, oh, I'm struggling to have ROI for my AI. If you dump 20, 30, $40 million with a supplier, I get it. If your collaboration suite costs double because you're enabling AI at that level, I get it. Those are hard things to overcome. In fact, by the way, that kind of goes back to, can the system move at pace, right? Are people ready for that amount of change? Are your processes ready to take advantage of this? And that leads to another value contribution from this type of environment we built, is that we increment, right? So it's another use case, and we're doing these workshops with our peers and colleagues to say, hey, here's some use cases that worked in other industries. Do you think they would work for you? How do you perceive value? How do you perceive risk? What's your appetite for change? And in a short period of time, you can come up with some high value opportunities, and you can put them into an environment where you've already sunk the cost. It is in my opinion, it's a very effective way to look at AI.
Yeah.
And then we've got other use cases where it's so good to buy, it's worth the hurdle. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll spend the money. That's fine. But I've got a different ROI calculus when I'm going to go outside versus inside.
Yeah. I just thought it was a great perspective because we're not seeing a ton of organizations do that. I'll tell you in a moment what we are seeing a lot of happen. But it just reduces the risk for you in the organization, but allows for there to be a safe space of innovation. Because I think a lot of the innovation happens on what people are working on after 5 p.m. or on the weekends, or where they're able to test and play with those things that are just kind of on the periphery of what their day job is. And now you kind of have a safe space that you can do some of that with your own environment. So that's such an interesting take. And if people aren't looking at it, I think they probably should do the math and kind of compare and contrast building their own.
If I can add to that,
please.
one other thing I think, so we sort of categorize use of AI inside of Northrop Grumman as either enterprise AI, which is I enable the workers, or mission AI, which is sort of the agents we put in spacecraft or whatever it might be, right? The things we put in our products. And the company's been doing mission AI for a very long time. But we enable mission AI with an on-premise environment by giving them a safe sandbox to go explore and test things, right? So there's an additional benefit. And then you get into, well, what if you have an isolated environment, or you treat your OT, your operations environment, a lot of companies will secure their OT environments by isolating them. Okay, well, that's fine. But what if you want to have AI on those environments? Now you get into containerization. Guess what I can do when I've got an on-premise environment? So it really affords you a lot of flexibility. And last thing I'll say about this, I think you want to make it as easy as possible for people to adopt. Yeah. At least at this stage in sort of the maturity arc. And so if I start stressing about ROI, the adoption hurdle becomes bigger, and we add more bureaucracy to a thing where we're saying, hey, we want people to explore and experiment. So absolutely right.
I think where we are in the kind of hype curve of it all, people need to be piloting, experimenting, and not really throwing all their eggs in one basket. And what we've seen more of is organizations say, you know what, I'm going to get Copilot for all, or we got ChatGPT, OpenAI, we licensed it for everybody. And a lot of those organizations that we work with and are speaking to, they're really seeing a struggle with adoption, right? They may be lucky to see even a third of weekly active users on those platforms. So I immediately say, you need to be more focused on identifying the opportunity. Where's the ROI? Kind of get back to those fundamentals of building the business case around it. And that should be how you strategize around AI instead of just Copilot for all. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And we certainly looked at Copilot for all, or what, right? And came to that same conclusion. my comment earlier about systems and system capabilities, I think that's important. I don't think there's an ROI in making people write better emails or having something give me some perspective about the tone or whatever. I think, is there value in that? Sure. It's incremental value.
Yeah.
One of the concepts that I think is important for us to understand is what is foundation and what is value. And foundation for me is we built this system, we built this environment, you can use it, we can build on it. We have a data ecosystem, we can add more data to it. We have a data lake and this is how we manage it. We have automation and this is how we take advantage of it. But the value comes from the insight, from the actual process you were able to streamline. It comes from the use case you were able to implement. Enabling people to go to an AI system and explore it is not inherently creating value. It is building a foundation. You have a tool that you can take advantage of, but it misses the use case capability step that is so crucial to helping people evolve. Now, does it increase some adoption, some awareness? Sure, that's all goodness. And we at some point should get into citizen development conversations because I got some opinions around that we can get into. That's another thing that people will talk about as a way to get their community aware and enabled. But I believe that just opening something up is foundation. It is not value. And you have to help people understand how to create value by changing their process and enabling that with AI. And that's the step that ends up missing when you just do the Copilot for all. It's not that Copilot's not a great tool. It's a terrific tool, but it alone doesn't create the value.
Yeah, maybe more intentional, more thoughtful with how you
so.
look to enable. Yeah. And so where are you on just the general AI like hype curve of, is it going to replace everyone's job? Is it going to, completely transform our entire economy? Or is it going to be more of an enabler and an accelerator for existing workers?
I'm somewhere south of we're not ever going to have jobs and make money anymore. I think that
not quite there.
Yeah, not quite there yet. I think that that AI is changing. I experience it to be changing pace, and in some cases, many cases, changing quality. I don't see it replacing everybody because I think what's happening is the expectation has gone up in terms of what does quality look like. So now humans need AI to hit that quality curve. And now if we're gonna develop a solid rocket motor faster, right? We need to be able to do simulation faster. That takes AI. It's not that humans aren't involved in that process any longer. It's that we expect those humans to be able to be conversant and capable at using AI tools so that we can move faster in the capability we bring to our customer. And so I experience it much more as a pace changer than a full-scale replacement. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to replace some people's jobs.
Yeah.
But, if I go back 4 years ago, we were all saying everybody should learn how to code.
Yeah.
If I go back 2 years ago, we're going, oh my God, that was the worst advice ever. Nobody's going to ever need to code. And now we're going, people need to know how to code with AI.
Yep.
And I think that that's more of how we're going to experience it, at least in the interim here.
Yeah.
So I enjoy it. I like it. I find personal value in it. I find professional value in it. But I'm not quite worried for my job yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. I think with any emerging technology, there has to be some level of disruption. But to your point of we want people that know how to code and use AI, one of the questions I had for you outside of, what can businesses do to prepare themselves for AI? What can the individual do to prepare themselves for AI? I think a lot. It's interesting because these tools are all coming out at the same time. So you have kids that are graduating college, and it's like, oh, I need to learn how to use AI. But you have people who are mid-30s, and they're like, well, I need to learn how to use AI. So what would your advice be for the individual as these tools are coming out, innovating quickly?
Yeah, I know 60-year-olds who are going, I need to learn. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's true. One back there. I think there's a few things for folks to keep in mind. Curiosity is always a benefit, always. I don't think writing an email with GPT is going to get you there. Not in terms of how do I develop and maintain and create value for my company. Like, I mean, if you go back sort of philosophically, this idea that somebody pays me for my time in a job, like, is the coolest thing ever, right? I think I'm so grateful. My badge swipes, I still get in the door. Like, okay, we're good for another day. Like, I have gratitude for that. How do I create value? Because when my value stops, I'm no longer meeting my part of that bargain. And I think that value creation is dependent on, I'm curious. So I think curiosity is the very first thing. It's like when people have strong opinions about stuff, but they don't do the research to understand why they've got opinion. They just adopt to somebody else. I think it's better move if you go out and you do your own homework and then you form your opinion and then you lean in and believe in it. I'm all for that. But so I think curiosity is key. I think understanding the bare minimum is going to be, I understand how to use these tools in my environment. So for example, if I do contracts, I can use AI to help me write a contract, scan a contract, do a difference between two different contracts, look for onerous terms, look for red lines that didn't actually get marked. Like, there's a lot of things you can do. Understanding how that would work in my environment and how I would leverage that, I think, is a bare minimum. I can come up with those things. I understand how the tools work. I think that now we're having a bit bigger of a conversation. I don't think chasing a specific tool is particularly valuable right now. If I go back, at least in my industry, Codium was the premium code assistant. Then they got purchased. It became Windsurf, and then Windsurf on premise got set aside, and then it was in the cloud, and then Claude Code was the big thing, and then you couldn't use Claude with the government, and then you can use Claude with the government. You can't chase a specific tool, but you need to understand the concepts and you need to understand how to apply them. And if you can guide how you apply them, I think you're in the best possible place.
Yeah. It is changing so rapidly, though. I feel like Claude releases updates every day. I come in and it's like, relaunch to get the latest and greatest updates.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. And then, I feel like they release a new feature 10 minutes before we meet. And it's like, did you see this? I'm like, no. So I wanted to talk about these 5 other things we haven't had the chance to talk.
You can't be focused on one. You need to really just know how to enable and innovate on any of them and all of them, and do more than just the basics. The email.
And when you get into,
I love that saying, by the way, is like, don't just use AI to write an email. I think from what I've heard from our organization, as well as just around these organizations that are doing the Copilot for All example. Everyone gets it. They log in. They're like, this is going to be so cool. They log in. It's just a chat bot. So how can I help you today? And they're like, help me write this email to my boss because I'm nervous and I want to make sure there's no grammatical errors. And it's like, great.
But they don't even know how to leverage it.
$60 a month.
Enabling them is a big challenge. So, that's a big issue. And I think leaders can do more around AI than just taking the Copilot for All approach, right? Get back to those fundamentals of what's the business case, what's the ROI, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the greater specificity you've got, the better chance you have for a discrete use case. And for your listeners, I would say, if you're not sure what to do with AI, go use it for analysis. Build your thing, your email, your letter, your paper, your book, your whatever it is, and then ask AI specific questions on how to analyze. I think that's a much more fruitful start. And I've, at least with my internal employees and folks I know, that gets them thinking about, oh, well, what about this? Or pretend you're this person, or how would you evaluate that? Evaluation's a pretty easy way to sort of dip your toe in.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, one thing I saw recently on a keynote that Jensen Huang did with NVIDIA, he was talking about in the future, he thinks that leaders should consider a salary of an employee, but also, salary, benefits, overhead, all that, but also an equivalent amount of tokens, or at least an equivalent amount of tokens for AI use. Is that something that you can get behind, or that you think is a realistic future in terms of how we'll have to wrap AI as an enabler around every employee?
So if it's I thought what you're suggesting is that needs to be a benefit to the employee that goes along with the salary. I'm like, well, that's a little self-serving, Jensen, right?
How many Claude minutes do I get today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's very common practice to look at the cost of enabling an employee, right? PCs have a cost, mobile devices have a cost. Do you enable iPads for what level in your organization? Tokens have a cost. You know what I don't have to do with an on-premise environment chatbot?
There you go.
Right. So there's something that comes, you pay for that in terms of like point in time relevance. And I understand that they don't know where Britney Spears was yesterday, but they do have the capabilities, generally speaking, that we can bring to bear, and we keep that updated. So that's another benefit to that. But I just think it's part of the calculus of the cost. And, for us engineering companies, some of the tools we use to enable engineers to do product development are incredibly expensive. That goes into the cost of enabling that employee. So it's not foreign to me, but it's not
the next iteration of
it's another element of cost in enabling employees. That's how I would read it.
It's interesting too, because it may be seen as a benefit. Like, I wasn't thinking of that, but if you're competing against two different roles and one comes with twice as many tokens for use in AI, maybe that's one you'll take, like the dry cleaning or the free lunch at Google a decade ago.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask was, I think there's so many companies that can really afford to experiment with AI and make a mistake, and it really doesn't have that much of an impact. Mm-hmm. Northrop Grumman can't do that. A mistake when implementing an AI system the stakes are simply just higher. How did that change your approach when thinking about, I guess, your approach to AI?
Sure. Yeah. So when AI started to sort of turn a corner in terms of public awareness, I was at BAE at the time, but the same approach actually was applied to both companies. And then I sort of picked this up midstream at Northrop Grumman. Before I get into that, though, I would take a half a step back and say there are risks of AI that we're all very aware of. Drift, hallucinations, convincingly being wrong, loss of IP because commercial tools learn from prompts, false citations, et cetera. There's all kinds of things that are considered sort of normal risks of AI. There's other risks of AI that are AI being used as a tool to socially engineer, as an attack surface, as a tool that you do as a tool to produce zero-day attacks. We're seeing way more zero-day attacks than we've seen in the past. The creation of deepfakes. There's not a technology. It doesn't matter what anybody's saying. I mean, we've looked at this pretty extensively. There is not a technical capability to consistently and effectively identify deepfake. And so when you look at AI, not only as a risk as a user, but the risk as both a surface to be attacked and a tool to do the attacks, as a company, you have to think about how do you mitigate those risks. And so we have a library of risks that we actively, keep focused on. And then we have active mitigations of each one of those things. And this is a bit of a moving target. I mean, as you said, it's moving super fast, but it is about deliberately understanding that and mitigating that. And you weigh that risk with the potential benefit. Our board loves the idea of AI, but our board is not blind to the risks of it. And so it's a constant balance between those things. So for us, what we did in looking at that risk position was, first thing we did was we cut off easy access to it. We sent a communication out to our employees acknowledging it. Mm-hmm. I partnered with legal to build a immediate policy around it. And then we started down the path of enabling internal capability, because you can mitigate a lot of those other risks. There's a number of risks you can mitigate with that, not all of them. And then we, produced the exception process, because you need to have people, certain organizations just have too much benefit. You can't hold them back. So then how do you mitigate those risks? Well, lots of training and attestations and other things. And so we started to build up risk mitigations for where we needed to open the access. And then we built our internal environment and continue to manage that. So it was a very incremental but rapid step to respond to it, to acknowledge it, to help people understand those risks, and to manage them deliberately. And so we're best served with most of the internal stuff, and then we use training, attestation, continuous monitoring to mitigate from an external perspective. And then when it comes to either being subject to that as an attack tool, That gets into your whole security posture, which is some combination of your engineering, your threat intelligence, your collaboration, your processes, your network inspection, your endpoint inspection. Like there's all kinds of things that go into this, but I think it's really about having as comprehensive a view as you can and active mitigations. And sometimes those mitigations, like in the case of deepfakes, aren't technical, right? Sometimes that's process or communication or collaboration between like IT and HR, it might be. But I think it requires a very clear understanding and a very deliberate stance.
How is it navigating that when you talked earlier about how IT should be enablers and not kind of the bad guys? I mean, there's so much hype around AI.
Yeah.
And, you're in a position when you're like, was it like, listen, we're excited for this too, guys. We need to do it the right way, but trust me, we'll get there. How was that?
So this is such an important question, I think, just from a leadership standpoint. If I take a active position as a leader and I go in and I say, this is happening, here's what good looks like, here's how I suggest we do it, now I'm enabling a business. If I take a passive position, they're going to generate their own momentum. And now I'm having to say no or but or how, and then I'm a detractor. Right. Now I'm putting sand in the gears. And so I think as leaders, the best approach is to have an active plan and strategy and execute to that and socialize that. And you become the enabler, not the limiting function.
That's a huge thing for any leader in any topic outside of AI. That's huge, right? Yeah. Be proactive, be in front of it, control the narrative rather than be back in your heels reacting.
Yeah. And one thing I think is really important is, and I say this not because I think you mean it this way, but I do experience sometimes the perception is that what we're saying is have a story, is control the message. And what I'm saying is have a strategy. Right? Create the value. Show the leadership, teach, enable, provide, coach, provide examples, have an active plan that you're executing. So it's not only about messaging, it's about have a plan and work the plan. Right? And I think that
good point. Not just control the message, but you have to help Sherpa them and guide them through the right way of and understanding the risks. I mean, because with AI, it's I feel like the more access and more ability you give it, the risk almost, it's like an inverse curve. It increases exponentially the risk that the AI tools introduce.
One thing I did not consider was kind of tying to my last question of the security and compliance at Northrop Grumman may complicate the implementation of AI. But in reality, because of that security and compliance, regulation that's been going on for so long, you guys likely already had a lot of the, standard, or I should say foundational capabilities that existed, specifically like I'm thinking data classification, data labeling, data security, all of that. So I guess from listening to you talk about it, I didn't consider, I thought it'd be more complicated because of the security and compliance regulations around an organization like Northrop Grumman. But the reality is because of those, it was kind of already set up to navigate AI implementations faster than most organizations,
I think we all lead wherever we are, right? And I think there are elements of it. Yes, you get into data classification and the ability to do marking and data loss prevention and some of these other things that exist, like that helps us in this particular case. I can't just open up commercial tools. That makes it a little bit harder in that particular case. And so I think formulating a plan and a strategy based on the pros and cons of the enablers and the limitations that you have in your environment is critical for any leader. We were able to find a solution. Of course, I want to move faster. I always want to move faster, but I'm very pleased that we found a solution that solves more than one problem at one time, and doesn't put us at material risk. And so I think pros and cons in all directions for all different companies.
Yeah, great. Yep. So you mentioned earlier citizen developers and that you have views on that. I want to give you a chance to expand on some of those views.
Let me get on my soapbox here. I think okay. So I've heard it said that for example, China is ahead of the U.S. from an AI perspective, but what China's not doing is citizen development. And so the big thing for us is going to be enabling 300 million people to write their own LLMs. Conceptually, that sounds great. And yes, I'm sure we would come up with lots of creative ideas. When I think about citizen development, I think about access databases, which for anybody who's worked in IT, there's some core production system that's running on Access that somebody put together that's retired 15 years ago. And God, you hope that desktop doesn't fail because, right? And so I think the important thing when it comes to citizen development is not to just presume that that is a solution for all ills, but to build a framework around it. And so the way, and we are way early in this journey, but the way we are looking at this is actually, I think, it's best in class kind of approach from most of the highly regulated industries I've seen, which is people earn the right to do citizen development. So if you've got curiosity, you can take a class, you can get certified, you can do an attestation. Maybe we open up a little capability for you, and then you do a little more, and then we open up more capability. Just going, here's a tool, good luck, is I think we're going to put ourselves in a position where we have business processes relying on AI systems that were citizen developed that are not going to be maintained. They may not be secure. They may not be compliant. We may not have the right inventory for them, and so on and so forth. So I just think you need to be very deliberate about it. It's great if we can get the harness the creativity of the masses, but frameworks matter here, and I think they matter in most cases, but certainly in this one.
I like the Access database analogy. Like that was so many times there's been, oh yeah, and that's on Nancy's desktop, and we don't touch that. It's been that way for a decade. But the perspective on citizen developers, I think, is valid. You have to have a good structure, process, and it has to be iterative in terms of the access. In our ServiceNow practice, we have customers that come to us and ask us about that. Do you think we should do this? Should we open it up? And we're going, guys, you don't have the fundamentals. Like if you don't have the basic building blocks, opening it up is not going to, it's going to lead to more chaos and more issues. You're going to be having a multi-front battle instead of, enabling and adding fuel to the fire or accelerating the development.
The system has to be ready for the pace. Right. And so that's another great example. But yeah, ServiceNow it's a terrific platform, but it's not a free for all. It shouldn't be. So yeah,
they need to be educated, trained, and understand on it. So I'm glad that we touched on the citizen developers because that was a good take.
So we want to wrap up with, after all we've talked about today, tie it back together to the first question of the podcast. If you could go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Finish college. That would be my advice. It's funny. We all grew up in different circumstances. I was older when I met my father, and one of the things that I had always been super hungry for was advice from a dad, right? And so one of the first pieces of advice that he did give me, and I was old enough to sort of really ingest this, was don't let what you do today affect what you have to do tomorrow. And I really believe that, and I think I made choices when I was younger that affected what I could do tomorrow, and that created a much longer path. In some ways, I look back and I go, I'm kind of the slumdog millionaire of leadership. Like you take all of your traumas and all of your challenges and all of your the good and the bad of our past, and I think we all do that, and we incorporate that into leadership. If you struggle with focus, that means you have to lean in on a conversation. Maybe you're a great listener because you have ADD or whatever it is. If you grew up with nothing, you got hunger, you're going to continue to try and grow. If you grew up with lots, maybe you had lots of opportunity, you educated yourself, and you come in informed. I think we all come from different places, but the thing that we can control is understanding what we need to do next and being as prepared for it, or at least not getting in the way of it. And I think as a young man, I let things get in the way early. So that would be my advice to myself.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's good.
Rapid fire.
Yeah.
First one. What's the last book you read?
Principles by, I can't ever get, Ray Dalio.
What's it about?
Ray Dalio he's a retired, I think at this point, hedge fund, commodities trader, gazillionaire, 100 wealthiest people, all this stuff. But the thing that he was writing about was personal and business principles. And one of the things that I found really unique is he took his business principles and he codified them in algorithms that he then applied to the computer systems that would affect the trades. And so he effectively created an environment in his company where even if he wasn't there to apply his principles, the systems around them applied those principles because they took the time, both, first of all, to define them and then to codify them. And as a leader, for me, the thing I take out of that is I took a pause and I went, how have I actually defined my principles as a leader, and what does that look like? And I think that is a useful exercise for anybody in any industry at any point in their life. Just take a minute and go, who am I? What are my values? And in taking the time to explore that, you come to clarity, or at least more clarity than you had. So that's one of the things I really enjoyed about that book.
Does it take you a while to finish these books, because I feel like you think so deeply about what you're reading?
Yeah. It takes me a while to read them because I get distracted. I think it's more that. No, I do. And I'm not really a business book person. Like I was doing a town hall, and somebody said, "What's your favorite book in a town hall?" You don't usually get personal questions there, but I'm happy to answer. And for me, it's 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It was written in Spanish. I don't speak. I mean, un poquito, but it's such a beautiful book about the evolution of knowledge and the evolution of society, and it's written in a really sort of fantastical way. It's a gorgeous book, one of my favorites ever, and it's so different than Dalia's principles. Yeah. But I think you can just you can gather things from everywhere. Yeah. I was talking to my daughter when she was a freshman in high school, and she was taking a test on a book on the Scarlet Letter, and she was struggling because there were jumps being made in the questions that presumed levels of knowledge about other literature. I said, "Don't stress it. But life is an accumulation of this knowledge." And she came back and she's like, I was listening to a Taylor Swift song and she mentioned the letter on somebody's chest or whatever. Yeah, and she's like, now she's making that association, and she'll read another book and she'll have that association. And then you pick up. So I just think, when you talk about going deep into these books, it is the application of a life's worth of the accumulation of concepts and sort of refining them. And so I love the intellectual exercise. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, I love what you said about principles of, do that, know for yourself. Like, what's the goals? What are the structures? How would you make decisions? So often when we come into organizations, we ask, well, what's the roadmap? What's the plan for this year? And that's a missing element. Well, if you don't know what good looks like or what you're going after, that's where you start, is let's paint that picture, that roadmap. Where are we going? So I love that. I'll have to add that to the list.
Huge gift for me coming into Northrop Grumman. I'd been there for maybe 45 days, and they said, "Hey, we need your 5-year strategy." And I was like, okay. I'm going to ramp up that curiosity. I'm going to ramp up that understanding, and then we're going to build that. And we were fortunate in that it went well, but the act of expectation around having a roadmap really forced that, and that has been a part of every meeting since. It was our 25 strategy. It remains our 26 strategy, so it's held water. I totally agree with you. That can be a missing element, and it should be a foundational element, right? So,
and that becomes the North Star. That's great. So we saw on LinkedIn and discussed it the other day of your High Rocks training that you were doing.
Gosh, yeah.
So one question was, I feel like there's a correlation between leaders or folks that are working at their highest level and physical challenges that they undertake, whether that's Ironman, I've done a couple of those, whether that's High Rocks, whether that's, any one of those types of events. Do you see that correlation, and what does it mean for you? Like, why are you doing these types of things and putting yourself through that hardship and stress?
So that continuous improvement mindset that I talked about for leadership and expectation for staff and so on and so forth, I don't just preach it, I kind of believe it.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and I think really, if I'm being totally honest, it's more, I have this hypersensitivity to atrophy, right? It's like, if I'm not
sense of
getting,
urgency
it's like if
before.
I'm not getting stronger, I'm getting weaker. If
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
getting smarter, I'm getting, dumber. If I'm not getting closer to
Yeah.
the people that I care about, I'm getting further away. And so, I'm not saying it's particularly balanced, but I don't really know any other way. And I've had periods of time where I've leaned away from it and gained weight or slipped away from a close friend or whatever. I mean, it's not always perfect in that way, but that creates an urgency. It creates a desire to lean in, because the alternative is nothing is moving away.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's not really another choice.
Yeah.
And then you learn to love it. Right. I think discipline is a differentiator, and if we live our lives with that discipline, not just work out with discipline or work with discipline or have a relationship, you got to do it
Everything
across the board,
Yep.
right? Or at least aspire to.
Yeah.
So it's a goal, not a reality, but I'm trying. Yeah.
You're continuing to strive for that. Well, how do you do it all? I mean, we were talking earlier about travel and all of that. 4 kids. How do you balance it all and keep it going?
It depends who you talk to, but poorly, I think would be the answer. Sometimes I think the discipline thing is a big piece of it, right? So when I travel, I try and get some exercise in before work. When I'm at work, I try and be very present, and I'm there as long as I need to be. When I leave work, I try and focus on home and family, and you just compartmentalize. When I'm home, I have a different schedule than I do when I'm at work, because I live in Arizona, as we talked about, and primarily the company works on East Coast hours. So I get up earlier, and instead of going to the gym, I start my work day, but then I'm done. I can do it in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And so you find these compartments of time and prioritize it. But the other thing that I think is really important is you got to have your downtime. You got to have your de-stress. You got to have your, watch your TV shows or read your books, and it's not all going to be productive.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it's segmentation of time. But I do some brain dead stuff too.
Yeah.
Right?
Good.
It's good for all of us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. Was listening to a podcast this morning talking about, it was a sports podcast, but they said something that made me think of you. And the guy was talking about changing jobs, specifically within the head coaching space, but I'm going to apply it here. And he was saying, if you're not, sweating bullets, or you're not super nervous when you first start, a new position, it's like you're not challenging yourself. Now you have come up through some pretty large, complex organizations, but was there ever a moment, I don't know if it was, your current, getting hired as your current role at Northrop Grumman, or maybe it was back BAE, getting promoted through the Honeywell ranks. Did you ever a moment where you're like, I don't want to say starstruck, but you were like, I'm really in charge of all of this?
I certainly felt it at Northrop Grumman. It's a huge organization with a big budget and a lot of people, and it's primarily insourced, so it's all like kind of in your face. As I mentioned earlier, I've always enjoyed a certain gratitude for the opportunity, whether it's my first project management job, or getting hired as a consultant, or leading a large organization. And so that's balanced that in a way. Maybe it happened independent of the size of the organization. So even for a larger organization, it didn't feel as crazy, because I just still had the gratitude, right?
Yeah.
So there is that. I do think there's a very natural curve to starting a new organization in terms of how we look at it and our perceptions and how we should approach things. And that is way heavy weighted on the early side of that, as you learn and you meet and you try and understand, and so on and so forth. And so, I've always taken that seriously. I would say, though, you do get to a point in your career where you have at least the option to believe in yourself. And I think for a lot of early career folks I talk to, that imposter syndrome is a constant thing. I think for different genders approach stretching into roles differently. Generally, I'm not saying for every single human, but finding a way to believe in yourself does not mean that you won't work hard. It doesn't mean you don't have lots to learn, but it means you give yourself the grace to go through that process, right?
Yep.
And I think that's a thing going into a new job. It's always lots of work and there's always lots of opportunity, but I'm learning to give myself some grace in trying to work through that process, and that makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
You know, so you're balancing that with urgency and expectations of yourself and from the organizations you work with. But I would encourage folks to believe in themselves a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, like you said earlier, of taking your legs out from you is what success looks like in an Ask Me Anything. You need to be comfortable with getting challenged, and that's where you grow and develop. So.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a great point.
Anything else?
I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say thanks again for being here. I think your career is very impressive, but I really enjoyed jumping outside of technology itself again and kind of listening to some of your philosophical points around leadership. It's very interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Travis.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really appreciate it.